seriously popular.
Welcome to the Life of Bryony, a podcast where we explore the messier parts of life. Today, I'm joined by the incredible Abi Feltham. Abi's story is one of resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship. After battling addiction and finding sobriety, she's now facing terminal cancer with a strength that's truly inspiring.
And in that moment, it made absolute sense to me that I couldn't drink anymore. It was like solving an algebra equation that I've been trying to solve my entire life.
If you're struggling with your own battles, Abi's story will remind you that it's possible to find hope, even in the toughest of times. My guest today is Abi Feltham. She's an inspiring advocate for mental health and sobriety who's faced incredible challenges with both grace and resilience. Abi's story is one of transformation. After battling addiction for nearly 2 decades, she found sobriety, and now she's navigating life with a terminal cancer diagnosis. So if you're looking for a conversation filled with honesty, inspiration, and the courage to keep going, you'll love my chat with Abi. A gentle warning, there are references to suicidal ideation in today's episode. As always, there are some great links in the show notes to help you if you're struggling. Abi, your content has made me howl with laughter. You're like getting sober content. There's obviously a serious element to it as well. And so I'm so grateful that you're here.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here.
Now I've done that, I'm going to say, Abi, when did you realise you were an alcoholic?
Well...
Do you describe yourself as an alcoholic?
Big time alcoholic.
Because I at first, I don't know if this resonates with you, I was like, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm an addict, because that just sounded cooler.
It does, a little bit.
It does sound a bit cooler, yeah. And then I realised after a while, I'm like, no, you're just a common or garden alcoholic who happened to take drugs so you could continue to drink.
Yeah. No, I'm also completely garden variety alcoholic. I don't know, I try to be a bit more exciting and add lots of different other descriptive words onto it. But at the end of the day, I'm just a bog standard alcoholic. I'm like powerless to alcohol. I can't control it. It makes me miserable. It makes me destroy my life. And once I start, I can't stop. I'm just so ununique. Like,
it's such a devastating realisation,
yes.
But also quite a relief.
Yes. There's a lot of comfort to it because you're like, oh, I'm not a freak. I'm not alone. I'm not the only person to ever experience this. So that means there must be, hope. There must be something that comes after this because other people have experienced it and they've recovered. But also it's a bit like, oh, I'm just like everyone else.
Can we go right back to,
Sure.
Let's go back to the beginning. So you had quite a loss at quite a young age.
I did. My father killed himself when I was 3.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. It does.
We've sat down, I've known you for 10 minutes, and I'm like, my first 2 questions are just like absolute fucking humdingers.
Yeah, tell me about your history of addiction and your dead dad. Thanks, Bryony. No,
sorry.
it's fine.
We can stop if you want. We can just go and eat cake.
I'm very comfortable talking about the difficult things I've gone through. Hearing other people's stories has always helped me with my own struggles. So I'm very happy to talk about these things because hopefully there's someone out there in the ether who will be listening or watches my content or anything like that who will find a glimmer of hope.
I'm assuming you don't remember that time.
No, hey, here's something sad. Here's something to ruin your day. My first memory is of finding out that my dad had died.
Really?
But yeah, I have a very, very vivid memory of my mum running through the front door in a pink dressing gown, and I knew something was wrong. She was really upset. I know now that she had just found out that my dad was dead, and she had heard from police officers. And so she came into the house, ran through the house and kind of grabbed all us kids. I've got 2 brothers and a sister. And we all just sat on the floor crying and howling. And I didn't really know what was going on. I'm the youngest, but I knew something was very wrong and something bad had happened.
Was that a sort of sense that you had of your childhood? Was it a defining moment, or is it just, it's hard to know, isn't it, when that's your childhood? You don't know anything different.
Yeah. I think definitely my dad dying by suicide was something that definitely shaped me into adulthood and changed my brain chemistry, really. It changed the way that I understood emotions and understood my own emotions and my own sense of identity. All of that kind of got skewed growing up. It was the early 90s when he died, and mental health wasn't spoken about.
So did you know that he had died by suicide?
Not until I was a teenager.
Right, okay.
Not until I was a teenager. It was very hush-hush. Like, there was shame surrounded about it. It was like a family secret.
Right.
Like, we sometimes spoke about it in the family, but as soon as he died, he was basically never spoken about again.
Really?
Yeah, all the pictures came down. We never went to his grave site. We never celebrated his birthday or any anniversaries. There was no oh, your dad would have been so proud of you. He was just erased because no one knew how to deal with it. And I think just it being in a time where just mental health and all those kind of things were just so stigmatized, weren't talked about. And my kind of family way of coping was very British, very stiff upper lip, very, okay, we close that book. We never speak of this again. Let's move forward. Keep on smiling, what will the neighbours say, kind of, yeah. And then also my mum was left with 4 young children as well. It was very much like autopilot.
Yeah.
We keep going. I think it would be very difficult to be in my mum's situation and stop for a moment and mentalise and think, okay, if I don't deal with this right now, my kids are all going to become mentally ill alcoholics and they're all going to be emotionally unstable. I think the forefront of her mind was survival.
Yeah.
And going to work and feeding the kids rather than, getting us all counselling, which would have been lovely, actually, thinking back to it. But that experience and kind of learning from a young age, it's not that I was taught that, but those were the messages that I received as a young child was if you feel an emotion, you mask it, you throw it out. If you feel a feeling and it's difficult, you do not keep on feeling that feeling. You get rid of it.
You turn away from it.
You turn away from it. You don't talk about it. And so I never really understood how to process emotions, or I never really understood myself. And that habit of mine kind of steered me towards alcohol because that was the easiest way to stop feeling.
How old were you when you had your first drink?
I was probably 13 or 14. I hear a lot of other alcoholics talking about when they had the first drink, everything changed. But I never remembered my first drink, really.
Yeah.
I just remember there being lots of drinks.
Yeah.
At a young age. My drinking was also very British. So I've never had a unique experience ever. It was all cider on park benches.
Yeah,
and
very teenage.
Yeah.
I don't know, is it still teenage to do that?
I don't know. I have a 16-year-old niece and she had an Archers and Lemonade the other day.
That's quite 90s.
That is quite, yeah.
Noughties.
I will say my sister's in her mid-40s, so I think, and she supplied the alcohol. She was like, right, if you're going to drink, you're going to drink under my watch. So she was like, what did I drink when I was 16? Archers and Lemonade.
God.
Yeah.
So I remember my first drink, I certainly drank alcoholically, but I just remember blacking out, and then vomiting everywhere, having half a litre of vodka and, which was really fucking dangerous, But I remember the thing that I look back on now as quite alcoholic is that objectively, you look at a situation that makes you vomit all over your shoes, your new shoes that you've saved up your pocket money to go and buy, and by the temperance fountain of all things in your, in your local town, and your mate's mum has to come and get you and put you in a bath. It's all quite humiliating. You would probably be like, I'm not going to do that again. And I was like, let's get back on it, the next weekend, which was it's that kind of, I guess, you speak to, which relatable for kind of a lot of people in Britain, is that the only way you're taught how to cope with stuff is have a drink at the end of the day.
Mm. I'm not a mother myself, but there's that mummy wine culture sort of thing. You need wine to get through the day.
Yeah. Being
a parent. And it's very, very deeply ingrained in our culture that to cope, you need a drink. To celebrate, you have a drink.
Yeah. To do anything.
Yeah.
You have a drink.
If you're sad, you have a drink. If you're angry, you know what? Have a drink.
So tell me, so you had your first, you started drinking in your early teens. How did it progress from there?
Although I don't remember my first drink, I do remember that time when I started drinking and really enjoying it. I was having a great time. Up until the point that I discovered alcohol, I really hated myself. Like, I guess you could say I was a kind of typical angsty teenager, but there was like a deep-rooted self-loathing there. And my like internal monologue always was just like, you're not good enough. You don't deserve to be here. Very, very damaging things for a child to be telling themselves. I guess that comes from self-esteem issues from my father dying at a young age, me not understanding myself, all those kind of things. But when I started drinking, it shut that voice up. It stopped me from feeling anything, really.
I think it's a really interesting thing that, like, I don't know about you, but when I first got sober, I became quite like vehemently anti-alcohol. I was like, alcohol's really bad, it's evil, it should be banned. And I now realise that actually I'm quite grateful for alcohol, weirdly, because I don't know how I would have got through life without it. And for me, what I've learned in my sobriety is that, you know, and I think people don't talk about this that often, it's like, actually, it worked. It worked until it stopped working. And then I needed something else. And that's what I found in recovery, you know. And so alcohol becomes our coping mechanism that kind of gets you through a certain amount of things. And I don't know about you, but I look back and go, what the fuck? How did I not die? Because some of the situations I put myself in were so fucking dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it's not really a question. I guess it's just us, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. No, I was definitely of that camp, like.
Because you do some, like, really fantastic, brutal content on social media where you really go there. Like, you're not one of those sober influencers who's like, here's my beautiful life, and, you know, and everything's kind of filtered and lovely. You're like, this is what alcoholism looked like. This is what I look like in the grips of my addiction, you know, and to kind of look at it, it looks quite shocking, but it's actually what all of us who are alcoholics went through.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely, I put a lot out there in my content. There's a lot of pictures from when I was drinking and drugging. And I do talk about the really kind of gritty stuff.
Can we talk about some of it now?
Yeah,
because I think the gritty stuff is so important, and not gratuitously. Like, I think it's important because there will be someone listening who has tuned into this podcast because they want to know about, you know, like, I remember when I first got sober, all I wanted to do was listen to the war stories because I was like, I could not believe that other people had behaved in that way, because all along, the whole way through my drinking, I thought I was the only one that behaved like that much of a dick or did those shameful things. And it was such a revelation to learn that actually, no, this is what happens to all people who get addicted to alcohol. They don't cover themselves in fucking glory, you know. And I think the gritty stuff is like, I remember writing about this thing that happened to me just before I got sober, whereby I went to a friend's 40th, and one party trick was like being able to seek out the person who was doing the cocaine. And I remember coming to in a kind of like field, and, you know, my husband and daughter were asleep in the kind of like country house behind. And this guy was like performing a sex act on me. And I remember being like, I don't remember how this has like happened, but I remember thinking, I can't ask him to stop because he's been giving me cocaine all night, you know. And I put it in my book about getting sober, Glorious Rock Bottom, and people were like, oh, do you really want to do that? And I'm like, no, of course I don't really want to fucking tell people about this incredibly shameful moment in my life. But I also really don't want women especially to be out there carrying this shame around with them, where they're like, I did this terrible thing, or this terrible thing happened and it's my fault, and all of that stuff. And I'm like, what I want is people to get better, because shame dies when you expose it to the light. The reason I put that in the book was because that's the reality where alcohol and drugs take us if we are in addiction, to really shitty places. And it was only by recognizing that I wasn't a bad person, I was just an ill person who sometimes did bad things because of that illness, that I was able to move through it and get better. So let's talk about the gritty shit.
Yes, let's do it. Yeah, no, you know, the whole shame thing, like that's really what stops a lot of people from.
It keeps us sick.
Yeah, and it stops people from taking the step into recovery or sobriety, because it's like, oh, I'll have to face all the shameful things I did, all the horrible things I did. But yeah, you know, I like to set them free and also show other people that, like, hey, look, you might have done all these terrible things when you were drinking and drugging and doing whatever, but that doesn't mean that you're like too far gone or there's no hope for you. You might have done things that you have been ashamed of, but there is hope and there is a life after the terrible things.
And also, it's that thing of like saying to people, yeah, you still are worthy of recovery.
Yes.
Because I definitely had this thing where I was like, I don't deserve to feel good because look at how badly I behaved.
Yeah. I definitely felt the same. I did a lot of self-sabotaging, especially when I was in active addiction. And that all stemmed from being like, oh, I don't deserve good things, so I better make everything worse for myself.
So what would you, I mean, I don't want to like, gratuitously be like, what's the worst thing that you did while you were in active addiction? But are there some things that kind of stand out to you that you think might help someone who's listening to kind of know that it is possible to go and get help? You know, you can be in this position and still be worthy of recovery.
I think some of my behaviour was really like not on when I was in active addiction. I've done plenty of like embarrassing things, like, you know, wetting myself in public and throwing up all over myself, all that kind of things. But it was the stuff that I'm really not pleased with myself about is my behaviour and how I treated other people when I was drinking. Towards the end of my drinking career, I basically annihilated my relationship. I'd moved to the States to be with this guy and I was madly in love with him, but I basically destroyed everything with my rampant alcoholism and just my self-destructive behaviour. And I wasn't very nice to him. And after we broke up, I like crossed so many of his boundaries. I wouldn't leave him alone. I was texting him and calling him all the time and basically just harassing him, basically, because I was still in the grips of addiction. Doesn't excuse the behaviour, but I was out of control and having my own little breakdown. Yeah, the way that I've behaved and treated other people. Now in sobriety, I'm very in control of myself and I'm able to stop and think, and I have respect for myself as well as others, and I'm not just thinking about my next drink or where I'm going to get crack from, you know. I'm thinking about other people and how they feel and how my behaviour can affect them.
So you were, for a lot of your drinking career, as you put it, you were living abroad.
Yeah.
Which, you know, like getting crack in like Southeast Asia or...
Well, I actually got a lot of meth in Southeast Asia.
Right, okay.
I had a lot of crack in Canada. Lots of opium in Thailand. I went through a huge opium phase. Basically, whatever. I was, completely out of control. I didn't really care what happened to me. Didn't care if I lived or died. So I would do any kind of drug that someone handed to me, really, because like I was like, if I die, I die, you know? Yeah, and it was all running away. Like, I went abroad to begin with because I was going on a 6-month backpacking trip to Thailand. But while I was away, I discovered that I could like work in bars and support myself that way and get paid in alcohol and drugs by the owners. And they'd put me up and pay for my visa. And I could basically live for free and be in this party lifestyle with no consequences, no responsibilities. And I was like, why would I ever give that up? Like now, that is my personal idea of hell.
Yeah.
I cannot think of anything that sounds less appealing.
Yeah.
But when I was in my mid-20s, that was the dream. I was like, oh, I can just run away from all my problems, not have any responsibilities, and like live in the mountains in Laos and just get paid in whiskey. Like, this is fantastic. Like, I saw no reason to go home until I realised I had a massive drug and alcohol problem and that I was really depressed.
When did you realise that?
Probably about 5 years before I came home. Because I just got it into my head that this was the dream. This is what I wanted to do with my life.
Which was destroy it.
Yeah. And just not live in the real world and not... Well, I just wanted to drink. I just wanted to drink and drug. And that was as far as my ambitions went, really.
alcoholism is often described as a disease of denial. Like it's one of the few illnesses whereby the symptom is that it tells you don't have it. You know, so it can be a long, old, drawn-out process before you realise you have a problem. And the reality is some people never get there. And I don't know why some people do, and I don't know why some people don't. Like, it seems to me sheer dumb luck, and that's partly because we don't talk about this stuff. You know, it shouldn't have to be that way. Were there any kind of rock bottoms situations where you were like, I really need to stop this because if I don't stop this, I'm going to die?
I had many rock bottoms. It was one after the other. Like every time I thought I got to the bottom, I grabbed a shovel and just kept on digging. But I thought that was just my lot in life. I thought that's what I deserved, was to be a depressed drunk. Like I got to a place of pure acceptance, and being sober never came to my mind because that meant that I couldn't drink anymore. If I got sober, then I'd have to stop drinking, and that didn't even compute. Like, it wasn't an option. So yeah, rock bottom after rock bottom, but none of them were a wake-up call.
Do you feel able to talk about some of the kind of things?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it can feel a bit gratuitous, but like people know that it's like really powerful to hear that like people have experienced this thing and then come out the other side.
Yeah. So I think the downward spiral, which eventually led to my sobriety, so there's a positive, probably started when I was living in Australia, and I had come to this place of acceptance that I was an alcoholic. Like I couldn't stop drinking. I was a morning drinker. I was an at work drinker. I lost like several jobs and like all this kind of business. I put vodka in my chamomile tea.
Really?
Like, yeah.
How did that taste?
Yeah, like hot vodka, really. Like the chamomile tea does not like mask the taste of vodka. It just makes it warm.
Did it take the edge off? I don't know.
Well, I think I started doing it because I didn't have any other mixes in my house. And I was like, well, I have to drink this vodka somehow. And chamomile tea was the only thing that I had. And then I was like, oh, actually, this is quite nice. And also chamomile wellness. Yeah. So I just carried on. It was my little relaxing drink.
Like levels of delusion that we are under. I always remember, like, if I'd like been out and I hadn't slept or whatever, I was like, I can't have a coffee because that's going to make me feel really bad. Like, what the fuck? Like, we've just been taking cocaine for 3 days, Bryony. Anyway, so you're drinking there you are with your vodka and chamomile tea.
Yeah, and I came to a point where, I could not control myself. I remember I was house sitting for some friends of mine, and they were gone for a couple of weeks. And as soon as they left me with the keys and got on the plane, I was like, right, liquor cabinet. Went straight to the liquor cabinet, started helping myself. On the first day, I drank like a bottle of vodka, a bottle of whiskey. And then the next day I woke up and was like, oh no, I better replace that because I've drunk their alcohol. That morning I replaced those 2 bottles and drank them both immediately. Yeah. And that cycle carried on for, a couple of weeks, the entire time they were away. By the time they got back, I was a wreck. Like, I was just, a mess. And then I told them I had the flu. That realization that I could not be in a house where there was alcohol without drinking it. I was like, okay, I definitely don't have any control over this. I'm definitely an alcoholic. By that point, I knew that the kind of definition of an alcoholic would be someone who couldn't stop drinking even when they wanted to, someone who is really powerless to alcohol. And I was like, oh, wow, that's me. I can't control this. But I accepted it, and I was like, yeah, I guess that's my lot in life. I'm destined to be a depressed drunk, and I don't deserve anything else. So I guess this is just how I'll live. And I carried on that way. And as I did, I just got more and more sick. And my mental health got worse and worse and worse until I was incredibly suicidal, and I was like planning ways to do it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I thought about it all the time. I met a man.
Always the solution.
Yes, and he fixed me.
A drink.
Yes, he fixed me a lot with that. Well, I was very, very depressed when I met him, and that kind of initial rush of love made me feel happy momentarily. And I was like, oh, this man has fixed me. I'm fine now. All that alcoholism and depression stuff, like, forget about it. I'm in love. So nothing can hurt me now. It turns out like that kind of initial spark of falling in love only masked my problems for about a month until I was back into the throes of alcoholism. But this time I was in New York.
Right, okay.
And I was like, oh no, now I'm a depressed drunk in New York. Like, what? So he ended up kicking me out of the house because he would go to work and I'd drink all of his tequila. He'd come home and I'd shout at him.
Right.
And we met in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And so he was like, where the hell did this random drunk British chick come from? Why is she in my house shouting at me? So he chucked me out.
This sounds, you're twin sisters.
Yeah. And I ended up in Canada. And then I was heartbroken. And really, like, I was like, this is it. This is the most sad I'll ever be. Heartbroken, suicidal. And I was like, oh, how can I make things better? So I started smoking crack.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And how did that work out for you?
Well, surprisingly, it made things worse.
Really?
Yes, in a
Gosh.
surprising turn of events.
That is surprising.
Yes, and yeah, things got worse. And my suicidal tendencies were just like, exacerbated tenfold. And then I was just in a dark and dingy flat with some Canadian bloke, like just smoking crack all the time. And I was like, well, this didn't go to plan. This is not what I envisioned. So I did the alcoholic thing and I moved.
Right.
Yes, I went to Vancouver Island. I was like, hey, if I leave this city, I was in Ottawa at the time. If I leave this city, I will be fixed. Basically, I was trying to find anything to fix me, but changing my behaviour.
Yeah. Anything that fixed you as long as as long as it didn't involve having to give up alcohol and drugs.
Yeah, and as long as I didn't have to change or do anything or confront myself, wouldn't do it. Yeah, and then I ended up in Vancouver Island. I was working in a barbecue restaurant and I drank a bottle of vodka on shift. Mm-hmm. That was an appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
And also, it was kind of like drinking, like I was like, I need this vodka to live.
Yeah.
Like, this is survival. So if I don't have this, then I won't be able to function. So in my mind, it was justified to drink a bottle of vodka at work. My boss came in. I was very, very drunk, hit on him. Mm-hmm. He decided not to hook up with me. This drunken mess of an employee. And the next day he called me in for a meeting and sat me down and he said, I think you've got a problem with alcohol. He said, I think you should really sort that out. And obviously you don't work here anymore. I was like, yeah, fine. That's cool. And then I went on an almighty bender and it got to the point where I gave up. And I've been thinking about killing myself for years by that point. Mm-hmm. This wasn't immediately after. The firing, the fact that I lost my job was not really the catalyst for a suicide attempt. But I did. I was living in a trailer at the time and I tried to kill myself. It just got to the point where I'd had enough. I just didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't. Like, it was full-blown depression and it's not something that I wanted to do. It's something that happened. Like if I felt like I wasn't in control of it, just like my drinking and drugging. It was kind of like I didn't sort of wake up one morning and think, oh, it seems like a good day to kill myself. It just kind of happened, like almost like out of body kind of experience. But for once, the guy I was seeing stepped up and actually saved the day rather than destroyed the day. Yeah, he came into the trailer and found me and called an ambulance. So I ended up in a psych ward in Canada. A nice little grippy sock vacation, as they call it.
Okay.
Yeah, you kind of like wake up in the psych ward and you're in these weird pajamas with like non-slip socks on.
Yes.
How did I get here? Like, what is this? But yet again, not the wake-up call I needed. When these things were all happening, not at one point did I have the self-awareness or the ability to reflect on my experiences and go, oh, hold on, maybe something isn't going right, or maybe I need to change something. I had tunnel vision on self-destruction. Like I was just on this path and there was no time or space for me to stop and look at myself and think like, you are like out of control. When I got out of the psych ward, I went straight to the liquor store.
Wow.
Bought my vodka. I didn't stop and think like, okay, maybe something needs to change.
So how, in the end, I don't know about you, but the question I get asked quite often, you know, people send me DMs and they want to know, like, how did you get sober? How did you do it? Like, what changed? And for me, there were like lots of really awful things happened. And I didn't get sober. You know, when I talk about my rock bottom, like my last night, my last bender, it was awful. But it wasn't as bad as like a million other things that had happened. And I just described that thing of just being like, if I don't do this, I am going to die. I'm going to die by either choosing to take my own life, or I'm going to die by choking on my own vomit, or almost worst of all, I'm going to die by having to live in this Groundhog Day existence whereby it just the same thing over and over again. And actually that was the worst fate in a way.
That's a very similar place to where I got to by the end of my drinking. I decided to get sober. It was rather less of a decision, more of my only option. It was that or death.
Yeah.
Like what had happened was COVID hit. So all the other kind of expats and backpackers around the world kind of all
Scattered back
home. Yeah, everyone moved back in with their parents. And that forced me to move back to the UK and move in with my mum. And the place that I was avoiding all these years of kind of when I was on my almighty bender of self-destruction, drinking and drugging around the world, like the UK was the place I did not want to go back there. I didn't want to confront my past. I just wanted to keep on going forward, keep on traveling, keep on moving countries, keep on drinking, like never stop, never feel, never like experience an emotion. Because if I kept on going, I can go another day running away from my problems. But when COVID hit, I was forced to go back home. Like I had no money, no other option. And I got home and I carried on drinking. You know, it was lockdown, so there wasn't much else to do. But I think there was something about being in my childhood home, back where everything started, back where, you know, I had that experience of my mum finding out that my dad had died. And like I was in the same house where we all sat on the floor and cried over my dad's death. Like, it was almost like being back at the scene of the crime, this place where I'd grown up as a teenager hating myself. It kind of really forced me to look in the mirror, and I became very reflective, something that I had no intention of doing. Like I didn't think, oh, I'm miserable, maybe I should look at my life. It was just being confronted with my childhood and my teenage years in that house. I had the realization. I feel very, very lucky that I had this sort of epiphany. But one morning, I was cleaning up all the bottles from my room. I'd been on this almighty bender, just drinking bottle after bottle after bottle of wine at my mum's house. And I'd stashed them all at the top of my bed, which is what I used to do when I was a kid, when I was hiding my drinking from my mum. And one morning, I was clearing up all those bottles, very hungover. And I put them all in a black bin bag. And I sat at the end of the bed. And I remember putting the bin bag down, and I remember all the clinking sound of all the bottles. And I remember just sitting on the bottom of my bed and then just coming to the realization that I didn't have to live this way anymore. It was almost like a little voice that just kind of told me, you don't have to do this anymore. You can let go now. And in that moment, it made absolute sense to me that I couldn't drink anymore. It was like solving an algebra equation that I've been trying to solve my entire life. I realised that alcohol was at the centre of everything.
All your problems.
Yeah, and alcohol was the block that was stopping me from progressing and growing and feeling better about myself. It was very clear to me that I had no future, no chance at being happy if alcohol was still in my life. That's when I realised I did actually want to be happy. All this time I was like, oh, I don't care if I live or die. If I die, I die. Then I think at that moment I realised, oh, I do want to be happy. Maybe if I can be happy, then I'll want to live. Maybe I don't want to die. And then the realisation that I did actually want to start enjoying my life. I wanted to stop torturing myself and I wanted to stop making myself miserable. And that meant giving up alcohol. So I gave up alcohol.
And obviously, I mean, I feel like we need to do several podcasts with you because I feel like very much this discussion is about the depths of, despair that one goes to in alcoholism. Obviously, getting sober is a hard process, but I always think it's not as hard as the alternative. There are lots of organisations in the show notes that can help people in terms of recovery if that is what they want to do. And also for family members, if there's anyone they feel they need to support and how to have these kind of conversations. But I want to kind of come to you, Abi, before we finish, because the other extraordinary thing to your story is that a couple of years into this new wonderful life of sobriety, you find out you have a brain tumour.
Yeah. Yeah, in May this year.
Wow. And so how many years sober were you?
4.
God.
4 years, yeah. So my sobriety date is the 1st of April. Everyone thought it was an April Fool's joke. And I was like, haha, no, I'm actually a depressed drunk. I'm a full-blown alcoholic.
Yeah.
It's not a joke. Then, everyone took me seriously after that. So yeah, 1st of April, I turned 4 years sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I found out I had a brain tumour in May.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's probably some people listening who are like, that might have derailed sobriety for a lot of people. We talk about in recovery, don't we, like life on life's terms. And actually, I'm really amazed when I watch your content on Instagram. I'm just so in awe of you and how beautifully you seem to be navigating this huge obstacle in your life. And I wondered if actually being sober and the tools that you have developed through being sober, would you say that those have been sort of crucial in helping you to deal with this diagnosis?
Definitely. All the mental health struggles, all the substance abuse, alcoholism, all those challenges and overcoming those challenges just proved to me that I can go through hard things and I can experience difficult things and come out the other side. And it's happened time and time again in my life. So when I was diagnosed with, at first, a brain tumour and then brain cancer, my immediate reaction was like, okay, it's another thing, it's another obstacle, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough, but I am going to be able to cope with it and see I'm going to come out the other side. My life might not look like how I hoped it would be. It might be very different, but I have evidence that I can go through all these very, very difficult things, survive, come out the other side and live a life, even if it looks different.
Because I think there's that thing where in difficult times, I can be quite grateful I'm an alcoholic because I have this 12-step program. I have this design for living that enables me to deal with really shit things.
I have been in 12-step programs in the past. I joined 12-step program when I was 2 years sober.
Okay.
Because I had a mental breakdown. Because they don't tell you when you get sober that...
But life just gets really fucking easy.
Yeah. That's what I thought would happen.
The bad things continue to happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck?
I didn't realise
I thought it was going to be puppies and kittens.
That's the thing. Like, I didn't realise that after I quit drinking, I would have to live with all the reasons that I drank and then not have anything to protect me from them or to help me cope with them. I thought it was all going to be a fairy tale afterwards, but it turns out it's not, because it takes away your main coping mechanism that's masked all these things over the years. And now you've got to face them head on. And so I had just a complete mental breakdown at 2 years sober. I didn't drink, never touched a drink. In fact, I never really considered drinking. I was never at risk of that because by that point I knew that I did not want to do that. So I joined a 12-step program in order to cope, and it helped me massively. I don't go regularly anymore, and I wouldn't say that I apply it to
everything.
Yeah. I have a sponsor, and she has helped me so much.
But it's about finding other people like you, isn't it? It's peer support and community. Yeah.
Through so many difficult points that have nothing to do with alcoholism, like through mental breakdowns and through depressive episodes, and now through cancer diagnosis. My sponsor is like at my door with soup and support and cuddles and just like someone to talk to. I haven't used 12 steps to cope with my cancer diagnosis.
But the hardness of what you've gone through in terms of your alcoholism, it is like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
Or is that really fucking trite? That question that when people are like, well, has, cancer given you a new appreciation for life? And it's like, yeah, but I'd rather not have it.
Yeah. If I could choose, I would rather not have the cancer. But being diagnosed with cancer in sobriety, it made me very grateful for my sobriety, because pretty much everyone around me, their first thing that they said was, thank God you're sober dealing with this. Like, if you were still in the grips of addiction, if you were still drinking every day and you didn't have the emotional resilience that you have now, and then you got this really significant diagnosis, God knows how you would have coped. But going through all those years of alcoholism, obviously still deal with alcoholism daily.
Yeah.
All those years of active addiction, going through that and being on this self-destructive path and treating myself terribly and being very cruel to myself, and now having a cancer diagnosis, which will shorten my life and give me a limited amount of time on this earth. It just makes me want to spend that time being kind to myself. I felt that way already, but now I have more of a drive than ever to treat myself and others with love and just kind of fill my days with joy and just kindness. And obviously I'm going to have days where I feel crap about myself and I'll have a bit of negative self-talk, but I don't want to waste another day treating myself like a piece of poo, really.
Abi Feltham, you are fucking legendary.
Oh, thank you. So are you.
A heartfelt thank you to Abi for sharing her story with us. Her ability to find purpose and strength, even in the face of terminal illness, is a reminder that we all have the capacity to face life's challenges. If you've been inspired by Abi's story, please share this episode with someone who needs a reminder that there is always hope. We'll see you on Friday.